Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Let's jump right in. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. I have an amazing guest speaker with us today, Jessica. Jessica is a mother and aspires to write a book for good reason. Her story involves suicide, rape, murder, abuse, and neglect. I'm honored that Jessica is here today, willing to share this amazing story of darkness to light. If you're enduring any sort of abuse, I encourage you to call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7322 for assistance. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Of course. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit down and tell your story and share the struggles and the steps that you've taken to get to where you are today. One of the first things that I like to do before kind of jumping into the meat of the story is just to give some sort of a backstory as far as, what kind of childhood you had and, what kind of child you were growing up. So do you mind kind of giving us a little bit on that?
Well, tragedy in my life started early. Right before my second birthday, my dad committed suicide. My mom had some severe issues with depression, so I was mostly raised by my great aunt. I lived with her on weekends from the time I was 2 till I hit kindergarten, and then I lived with her mostly full time up until I was a teenager.
Wow.
My mom remarried. She had more kids. I did decent in school.
Do you feel as if the suicide of your dad affected you at such a young age? Did you kind of grasp that, or did it take a while?
It took a while to learn that I was different. I didn't have the normal dad that everybody else had that would do, Father's Day activities at school and things like that. I had a stepdad who was, he tried to be there, but he wasn't my dad.
Yeah. I can totally get that. 100%. When did your stepdad come into your life?
I was 5. And he was very gruff and very tattooed and very large. I can remember my mom telling me that we went to a family gathering and I walked in first and told people not to be scared. It was just my new dad. So that was kind of different.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. And then as far as your teenage years, going into high school, how was that for you?
My teenage years were like the typical teenage years. I was mostly a good kid, but I snuck out of the house on occasion. I had the occasional drink, typical unruly teenager.
100%. 100%. And then as far as, going into adulthood, but what were the struggles you had going into adulthood?
Adulthood hit me early. When I was 17 years old, I met the man that I would marry, and I wound up pregnant. I was 6 months pregnant at my high school graduation.
Wow. No kidding.
Yeah.
And how old was he?
He was 26.
26 and you were 17.
Yeah.
Did your parents have anything to say about that, or did they like him?
He was okay. He treated me decently. He was respectful toward my mom.
Makes sense.
Didn't have many issues at first.
Yeah, definitely. So when did you guys get married? What age? 18, 19?
I had just turned 18 about 3 weeks before we got married.
Wow. So like really 18, like fresh 18.
Yeah.
Were you happy on your wedding day?
I was.
Yeah.
I really was.
You were pregnant, I assume.
I was very pregnant.
Really pregnant, yeah. But happy.
I was happy that day.
That's good. That's good. When did you give birth? How soon after? Must have been like.
I got married in June, and I had my daughter in September.
Wow.
At 42 weeks.
Wow. So, young mom and a man who's about 10 years older than you.
Yep.
How did that go?
It was hard being a young mom.
Did you work?
I did not. I was not allowed to work.
Yeah.
And he was very much the provider. And as I got older, I kind of realized he was controlling me that way. I mean, you don't realize it when you're in that situation, but I couldn't work.
Yeah.
I couldn't have access to the money unless I asked him for access to the money. I couldn't go places unless I was dependent on him to go places.
Yeah.
So
how long were you married before you started to kind of see these signs? Like right away or within the first year or a few years?
It was pretty much right away.
Really?
Yeah.
So as soon as you got married, pretty much, he just kind of started becoming a little more controlling.
A little at first. I mean, small things that I didn't really. I was focused on a child, so I didn't pick up on all the other red flags, I guess you'd call them, up until they were right in my face.
Yeah, 100%. And then how long were you guys married for?
We got married in 2007. Our divorce was finalized in 2012.
No kidding. Did you have any more children?
Yes, we had a son in 2009.
Nice. So you have a boy and a girl, or?
After my first husband, I met my second husband. So we had a son together. I have a daughter and 2 sons.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. So I want to ask, one of the main issues with abuse is ignoring things that, looking back, you shouldn't have ignored. What were kind of like a couple of, pretty prominent red flags that happened during the duration of your relationship where now looking back, you're like, oh my God, that was totally a red flag?
We lived in a long-term rental in a hotel when we first got married.
Wow.
And when we first got together.
Yeah.
And there were 4 rooms upstairs. One at this end of the hallway, one here, and one at that end of the hallway. And the 4 of us that lived up there, all of us, we would visit each other. Our doors were pretty much open all the time. I went from our apartment to the apartment at the far end of the hall, and an old friend from high school was there. And I had known him for years. And my husband came home and saw that I was talking to a man and grabbed him by the throat and held him up in the corner of the room.
Oh my.
Yeah, that was a pretty big one that I just kind of swept under the rug. You know, he's had a rough day at work. He wanted me home so that I could have been kicking, you know. It was my fault. I was in the wrong.
Yeah. Was there any signs, or not signs, but did you also maybe see that as him loving you so much? Or did you view it as jealousy?
I did until the first time he hit.
Got it. Got it.
Well, the first time it wasn't me. The first time he punched a hole in the wall by my head.
Wow.
So at first I thought this was love, protection, and then it was jealousy, and then it was, I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
It was his behavior that was not right.
Yeah, definitely. What was the turning point that finally led to the divorce? What happened?
He had been on drugs before and told me that he was no longer using. And I had finally been allowed to work. We were having some financial difficulties, and I had gotten a job, and he didn't like where I worked. So I had worked my regular shift and then 3 hours overtime. And I came home, and the next day was Sunday, and he got up super early and was really irritated with me. And I could just tell something was off, and he tried to take the kids and leave. And I told him he wasn't going to take the kids anywhere acting like that.
Yeah.
And he left. And I got up and started cleaning the house, and I found a stash.
Really?
And I packed his stuff and called a friend and had all of his stuff sitting outside when he got back.
Wow. Good for you. So
it took a lot.
Yeah. So just like that, you were like, you said you weren't going to do this anymore, so that's it.
It took me a little while to get there, but yeah.
Wow.
He had a stash in our home where our kids could get to it.
Yeah.
He obviously didn't care about the safety of our kids, because if our kids could have got to that,
Yeah.
they could have overdosed.
Yeah.
He could have killed our children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to him, it was just like, whatever.
Yeah. You could have possibly saved your children doing that. You never know. Crazy. So he gets home from work and his stuff is all over the front lawn?
It was Sunday. He wasn't going to work. I don't know where he went. But he was for quite a few hours.
No kidding. And then, so he came home, and what happened?
Apparently I didn't get all of his stuff. He had loaded most of it into the truck, and he came inside and went to our closet. We were living in a different house at this time, but he went into the closet and removed something and got a gun out from behind something and pointed it at me. And I was sitting in the living room with the kids in my lap, and they were upset. And he pointed that gun at me while I was holding our children and said, one of us will die before this is over.
Wow. What the heck do you do?
I went and got an emergency protection order.
Wow.
Which, when we went to court for our divorce, I later dropped, which was the stupidest thing I had ever done. But that's what I did to try to save myself and my kids. And
definitely. So how long after that did you guys divorce? I mean, was it a quick divorce or did he drag it out?
that happened. That happened in April of 2011, and their divorce was finalized in February of 2012.
Got it. Wow, so not bad.
Not bad at all.
It's pretty average.
Well, in Kentucky, where I live, you have to be separated for 6 months before you can go through the divorce. And then you have to like attend so many
classes or something.
Yes, parenting classes. If you have younger children.
Wow. So they make you do some stuff.
They make you do some stuff.
Jeez. That's interesting.